Good evening all. Today we are starting with Apollo Knowledge Series, the first of its kind in Apollo Hospital, Vishakhapatnam. As you are all aware, for over 37 years, CMEs of hospitals have been the most sought after for updating clinical knowledge, and a large number of CMEs now are predominantly delivered online, especially since last year, which gives us an opportunity to reach out to much larger audience of clinicians, both general practitioners and specialists. Apollo Knowledge Series AKS is a major step towards redefining the value proposition of our CMEs by consolidating a collective and outstanding clinical experience and expertise to consistently deliver CMEs of the highest standards across the group. So AKS aims to augment knowledge in diagnosis, new treatment options, medical and surgical, latest technology, and how Apollo continues to strive for clinical excellence. So without much further ado, we would like to call upon Dr. Ramya Varada, a consultant endocrinologist at Apollo Hospital, Vishakhapatnam, to present on COVID-induced diabetes. COVID-19 predisposes infected individuals to hyperglycemia. Interacting with other risk factors, hyperglycemia modulates immune and inflammatory responses, thus predisposing patients to severe COVID-19 and possible lethal outcomes. So over to you, Dr. Ramya. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Narendra. So good evening, one and all. It's like a pleasure to be part of this meeting in this knowledge series. So today, without wasting much time, as we are already late by 15 minutes, I just want to share my clinical experience with COVID-induced diabetes. Yeah, hope my screen is visible and I'm audible. Yeah. So I'm starting with this topic, COVID-induced diabetes, like COVID and diabetes briefly. So I just want to talk about this topic especially because we in this couple of months, we just found a new etiology for diabetes. As we all know, viruses are responsible for diabetes. In the etiology of diabetes, we'll read about cytomegalovirus Coxsackie, and in this after SARS-CoV, the individuals develop new onset diabetes that we want to highlight in this topic. So I just want to discuss the topic under following headings: introduction and relation between COVID-19 and diabetes, and a few cases and the management of diabetes in COVID-19. So starting with this, we all know, we are just hearing there is huge difficulty in managing hyperglycemia in diabetes, and diabetes hyperglycemia itself is a poor prognostic factor for COVID-19. So we all know, not only in COVID, in any individual with diabetes, there is a development of severe pneumonia and sepsis. So here in COVID-19, there's 50% of the patients have a poor prognosis and increased mortality with COVID in individuals with diabetes compared to individuals without diabetes. So it is it become a very essential to manage, we should maintain a strict glycemic control to improve the outcomes. Coming to the association between the COVID-19 and diabetes, it was we all know hyperglycemia per se. Hyperglycemia per se has causes a defect in the innate immunity, and there will be defect in the T cell, and at the level of neutrophils, there will be impaired chemotaxis, phagocytosis, and defect in the complement action. All this leads to increased severity of infection. So, and in COVID-19, there is an increased risk of severe infection because of increased cytokines, which in turn impair the immunity. And COVID-19 itself, due to increase in the interleukin-6, there is an increase in the insulin resistance. As there is an increase in the insulin resistance and thereby hyperglycemia, leading to increase in the sepsis. And what is the hypothesis? What is the hypothesis relation between diabetes and COVID-19? It is the first hypothesis being the virus enters our tissues and organs through the ACE2 receptor. So the virus enters through the ACE2 receptor, which is present on like a number of organs and tissues. So the SARS-CoV virus attaches to the ACE2 receptor. And it was like acute hyperglycemia increases the ACE2 expression, which in turn facilitates the viral cell entry, whereas chronic hyperglycemia downregulates the ACE2 expression. So once it is downregulated, it further promotes inflammation. It's finally like COVID-19 reduces the angiotensin converting enzyme receptor expression and thereby promoting cellular damage and hyperinflammation. So the first mechanism being it enters the cell via ACE2 receptor. And the second hypothesis is the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzyme was identified as a receptor for human corona, like Eramus medical virus. It's like this virus is responsible for Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. And DPP4 plays a major role in the glucose and insulin metabolism, but it also increases the inflammation. So it was like since we are like going through the various treatment options for diabetes and COVID-19, we always choose DPP4 inhibitors because it has a protective action. By reducing the DPP4 concentration, it is like it also be a therapeutic opportunity to treat COVID-19. Coming to what are the reasons for increased mortality and poor outcomes in individuals with COVID-19 and diabetes. One is like there is a huge glycemic variability. So the inpatient has a hyperglycemia variating with hypoglycemia. The hyperglycemia, acute hyperglycemia is most of the times due to steroids. And there is immune defects. As we are discussing, there is an impaired T cell response. And most of the individuals with type 2 diabetes has associated comorbidities like obesity, heart disease, and kidney disease. So the postulated mechanisms, these are not still established, subclinical inflammation due to increased interleukin and reduced ACE2 expression, which increases the inflammation. So the study published in Diabetes Clinical Research Practice in 2020, it was like fasting plasma glucose is independently associated with increased mortality. So this was in a model 1 when it is adjusted for age and when it is adjusted for pre-existing cardiovascular disease and chronic kidney disease, and also the inflammatory markers. When there is a gradually increasing in the fasting plasma glucose, it is like there is a proportional increase in the mortality too. So the purpose of this talk is like it was not always the existing diabetes or there is an increase in the acute hyperglycemia, steroid-induced hyperglycemia responsible for defect in the innate immunity and poorer outcomes. It is like the virus itself is inducing the diabetes. So it was by reviewing the literature for the past 1.5 years, we are just seeing there is a two-pronged relationship. There is a bidirectional relationship between diabetes and COVID-19. And it was really true. We ourselves saw few cases who are absolutely non-diabetic with a normal HbA1c, developed diabetes after the onset of COVID. Later on, after 2 to 3 weeks, even they're not on steroids. That we are going to discuss in the next couple of slides. That is what we are highlighting here. There is a bidirectional relationship. It is not the hyperglycemia that is responsible for the worst outcomes in the COVID, but COVID itself is inducing the diabetes. So this is a picture which we are, this is a picture showing which we are discussing for the past 10 minutes. With the SARS-CoV infection, with the progression of the disease, there will be increased inflammation and treatment with the steroids that itself impairs the beta cell secretion and also increases the insulin resistance. That itself leads to hyperglycemia and increases the severity of COVID. And here another pathway that shows that SARS infection itself destroys the beta cell and decreases the insulin production and thereby leading to hyperglycemia. So this is a slide showing what exactly is happening with the beta cell destruction. As we are discussing the SARS COVID-2 virus, enters the cells via the angiotensin converting enzyme receptor that is also present on the pancreatic beta cell along with other cells. So once it enters the pancreatic beta cell, like there will be infiltration of the pancreas by the T cells, leading to like autoimmunity and damage to the pancreatic beta cell. This is the same thing happening with other viral infection also. So who are most susceptible? Genetically susceptible, the individuals who are genetically susceptible to type 1 diabetes or insulin dependent diabetes or pre-diabetes, for themselves, their beta cell reserve is already low. And once they are like infected with COVID, and like there is a rapid progression of beta cell destruction, they may present with type 1 diabetes or insulin dependent diabetes. And individuals with a pre-diabetes who also have a less beta cell reserve also present with a diabetes later on after the infection with COVID. So it was another thing is the individuals with the pre-existing non-insulin dependent diabetes may become insulin dependent due to damage of the pancreatic beta cells by SARS coronavirus. So, and the other thing is people who are hospitalized with severe respiratory disease are at highest risk even though doesn't receive the corticosteroids. So children and adults both presented with a new onset of insulin dependent diabetes after infection with SARS. So here are the few cases which we went through in the past couple of months. And this is a 45-year-old woman, so diagnosed to have COVID-19 and treated on OPD basis without steroids, and she is absolutely non-diabetic with a HbA1c of 5.6 at the initial evaluation and with no family history of diabetes. So 2 months after the onset of COVID, she presented with a severe osmotic symptoms of 1 week duration and generalized weakness and with a weight loss of 3 to 4 kgs over 2 weeks. So during routine evaluation, she's found to have random blood sugar of 450, which was very high, and with a urine ketones positive and without acidosis. So she's diagnosed to have a diabetic ketosis without acidosis. And the HbA1c at that time, after 2 months was 9.9. So she was hospitalized and managed with IV fluids and IV insulin and discharged on a basal bolus regimen. This happened only 1 month back. So we need to monitor whether she developed either insulin dependent diabetes or non-insulin dependent diabetes, or it's a transient phenomenon, whether she could be just maintained on oral hypoglycemic agents. We need to monitor. So the another case, it's vaccine related. A 50-year-old gentleman with no prior history of diabetes or pre-diabetes, and no family history of diabetes too. And he doesn't have an infection with a COVID-2 prior. With the first dose of vaccination, he developed osmotic symptoms, which he ignored. And later on, after the second dose, he developed severe generalized weakness with osmotic symptoms. And at that time, his blood sugar was around 300 milligrams per deciliter. And his HbA1c was 8.5. So the patient was initiated on metformin 1 gram, and he had normoglycemia after 1 month. And also we need to monitor whether this is transient or transient hyperglycemia to the vaccine, or maybe vaccine is also leading to a temporary beta cell or permanent beta cell destruction. We need to monitor. And this is another case. She's a 35-year-old female. She's a healthcare worker and she's infected with a COVID, and during routine investigations done on day 3, she has only mild elevation of inflammatory markers with a HbA1c of 5.4. And she's not started even on any steroids and antiviral drugs. She's only managed conservatively. During the second week of infection, she suddenly developed a severe osmotic symptoms and generalized weakness, and random blood sugar done at the time was around 400 to 400 milligrams per deciliter on 2 consecutive occasions, and the urine ketones were negative. So we plan to initiate her on insulin, and the repeat HbA1c was 5.8. Within the next 2 days, her sugars become absolutely normal, both pre-meal and postprandial values, indicating the acute hyperglycemia due to COVID infection. So on the several later occasions, her random blood sugar was only less than 140, and HbA1c after 3 months was 5.6. It's clearly indicating transient acute hyperglycemia due to transient damage to the beta cells. So now the dreaded complication currently is like mucormycosis. So we need to talk about one or two points. It was this is also most of the times it is due to poorly managed diabetes. This is present in almost 70% of the cases seen in India currently. And the 20% of the cases has newly detected diabetes. It was most of the individuals we saw here they doesn't have a prior history of diabetes, and the diabetes was diagnosed only at the time of when the routine investigations done for COVID. So these individuals are sometimes managed only in the house without hospitalization on steroids, and there is a poor glycemic management. That is also one of the factors predisposing to mucormycosis post-COVID. So coming to the management of diabetes in COVID-19 patients, it was what are the major causes for variable glycemic control in individuals with diabetes and COVID is one is there is an irregular diet and increased GI symptoms, and there is a stress and use of glucocorticoids for COVID management, and there is a in the interruption of diabetes management in the isolation wards and release of inflammatory cytokines due to COVID. So sick day rules, we all need to educate the individuals with COVID with diabetes, keep them be well hydrated, monitor blood glucose and maintain their temperature. If their blood sugars are persistently more than 250, monitor their ketone bodies. So it was this is an algorithm for monitoring. This is an algorithm for screening patients with admitted with screening for hyperglycemia. Yeah, sorry. So this is a algorithm for screening of hyperglycemia in patients admitted to COVID care facility. So in all individuals, those who are not even diabetic, please do a capillary blood sugar at the time of hospital admission, and perform a pre-meal and post-meal blood glucose with 2 hours after meal, capillary blood glucose after the first major meal, and send the blood for fasting plasma glucose and HbA1c the next morning if the lab facilities are available. So in the next step, if the blood sugar at admission, pre-meal and post-meal are well under control, and monitor for before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner and after dinner for at least for the next 2 days for an underlying hyperglycemia. The underlying hyperglycemia, when the capillary blood glucose more than 80 and pre-meal more than 140 and post-meal more than 180. So if the random blood glucose is more than 250 and the pre-meal capillary blood glucose is more than 150 and 2 hour post-meal is more than 200, so we are going to initiate on pharmacotherapy. So coming to so newly detected patients with diabetes at admission, if the pre-meal blood glucose is between 150 to 180 and the post-meal is between 200 to 250, we are going to initiate on OADs. So, and if the blood glucose at admission are above the range, pre-meal more than 180 milligrams or post-meal more than 250, we're just going to initiate on insulin. Coming to, so the individuals are initially they have a normoglycemia, no hyperglycemia at admission. When are we going to monitor the next blood glucose? So if there is a progression in the severity of illness and if the patient is initiated on steroids, we are just going to monitor blood glucose before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, after dinner for at least 2 days, which can be decreased. which can be decreased to twice a day if the values are normal. So if the patient is initiated on steroids, we are just going to monitor blood sugar after 2 days. So if the individual, high risk individuals, obesity, underlying cardiac disease, we are just going to monitor blood glucose 3 to 4 days. So coming to the what are the OHS we can be used in COVID-19? So it was most of the times we can use all of the OHS the patient, if the patient has a mild COVID infection and he could be maintained easily at home. And once the patient is hospitalized, we are just considering, we are just risk stratifying the drugs. So DPP-4 inhibitors are always safe. As we are all discussing, the DPP-4 inhibitors has also a role in the pathogenesis of COVID and has a chances of decreasing the inflammation in COVID-19. So all the DPP-4s can be used. And coming to the metformin, in mild and moderate disease, metformin can be used. The risk of lactic acidosis is less in mild to moderate cases. In severely ill patients with hemodynamic instability and hypoxia, metformin is contraindicated. Like sulfonylureas in mild to moderate case, if the blood glucose is well controlled with the previous OHA, we are just going to continue it. But generally we just withhold due to risk of hypoglycemia if it was given along with insulin. And the must stop drugs being SGLT2 inhibitors, because there is an increased risk of euglycemic decay and dehydration, and COVID itself is it causes dehydration. So, and coming to the pioglitazone generally there is a risk of fluid retention and edema, and if the patient is already on pioglitazone, most of the times we are just withholding. So the oral diabetic drugs which are safe being DPP-4 inhibitors and metformin in mild to moderate cases, because there is a severe insulin resistance. Even if the patient is not on steroids, metformin plays a major role, except in a severely hypoxic patients, we are just stopping it. So criteria to continue the oral anti-diabetic drugs: when the blood glucose levels are well under control, and with the patient old diabetic drugs, we are just going to continue it. And if the patient is conscious, he's able to eat orally, we are just continuing the oral diabetic drugs he's already taking, and the renal functions and liver function tests are normal. So coming to, this is the slide showing why certain anti-diabetic drugs are preferred. Yes, we are discussing metformin only in severe cases we are going to stop. It is helpful because even if we start on insulin and later on we'll shift the patient to basal bolus regimen, a single dose of 500 to 1 gram of metformin, if the patient is not severely ill or in acidosis or hypoxia, it helps in decreasing the dose of insulin. So DPP-4s can be given throughout the course, except in very severe ill patients. Sorry. So GLP-1 analogs, generally we are not advising even if the patient is using period, because it itself causes dehydration, and GLP-1 per se causes satiety, bloating, decreased food intake. SGLT2 inhibitors absolutely contraindicated. So this was a published. This was a table copied from the Lancet 2020. So showing the various anti-diabetic drugs which could be used in COVID. So I want to highlight this thing. Pioglitazone, it increased ACE2 expression in the liver, and there is an increased chances of COVID-19 infection through ACE2 overexpression. So that is the reason we generally stop pioglitazone, even if the patient is using pioglitazone and his glycemic levels are good, we are just withholding pioglitazone. Sulfonylurea, with a fear of hypoglycemia, because there will be a mismatch between food intake and a dose of sulfonylurea. That is the reason we are just withholding sulfonylureas. DPP-4, yes, we are just going to continue, and SGLT2 due to increased risk of DKA. And insulin at any level of illness, we are just going to continue. The advantage being it also has an anti-inflammatory and positive anabolic effects. So coming to the usage of insulin. So how are we going to use insulin, whether it's a subcutaneous or basal bolus? So like intravenous, sorry. So if it is like a basal bolus insulin, we are just going to start with the dose of 0.4 unit per kg. If an individual has an underlying renal disease or hepatic disease, we are just starting with a low dose due to risk of hypoglycemia, only 0.2 unit per kg. And we are just going to divide the insulin into the 4 equal parts if we are using regular insulin and NPH. And if we are using like analogs, we're just like 2 equal parts, basal 50 and bolus 50. So our target blood glucose being pre-meal of 100 to 150 and post-meal of 140 to 200. So when are we going to prefer IV insulin? The patient has uncontrolled hyperglycemia despite using subcutaneous insulin and is in shock and with a erratic intake. And if there is like any hyperglycemic emergency like diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperglycemic hyperosmolar state. So we are just initiating insulin at the dose of 0.1 unit per kg, and we are just titrating until we could maintain the blood sugar between 140 to 200. So we are just monitoring the blood glucose 1 to 2 hours, and just as soon as possible the blood sugars are well under control, we're just switching to basal bolus regimen. And we all should keep in mind, we're just not abruptly stopping the insulin drip, we are just overlapping with the subcutaneous insulin. That all we all should keep in mind. Before stopping the IV insulin, we should give subcutaneous insulin at least 1 hour before stopping it, so that to prevent the
हेलो
prevent acute hyperglycemia.
हेलो हाँ चिट्टी भाई कुछ स्नैक्स मिलेगा क्या चाय और ये ब्रेड बटर मिलेगा हाँ हाँ हाँ
How can we mute it? How can you? Yeah, it's okay. So the indications for IV insulin being, as we are discussing, DKA, uncontrolled hyperglycemia, and the severe hyperglycemia like pre-meal glucose more than 300 and post-meal glucose more than 400. And critically ill patients with sepsis and septic shock, we are just starting with IV insulin. So coming to what are the insulin regimens we are just preferring? We are preferring basal bolus regimen, like 3 times bolus, that can be regular or analogs, and a basal insulin. If we prefer NPH, we generally prefer NPH not once, twice a day. And if it is like a basal plus, like the patient, like most of the times blood sugars are well under control, we are just giving a basal and a prandial insulin before before the largest meal, or like we're just going to monitor the blood sugar at a 6-point scale, and at what point the blood sugar are like most of the times it's more than 200, we are just adding prandial insulin. And in the hospital, we're just monitoring the blood sugar before breakfast. It was like 6-point monitoring. We're just monitoring before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, and after dinner at bedtime for giving the basal insulin. So in hospital, just we are following a protocol of giving analogs or like regular insulin 3 times a day before all major meals, and NPH twice a day. It was like when we are just going through the literature and in the recent studies with the steroid-induced hyperglycemia, if the patient is on dexamethasone, we generally prefer a basal insulin of Lantus, because the pharmacokinetics of dexamethasone suits with that of Lantus, because it's like a long duration, whereas methylprednisolone pharmacokinetics suits with more of NPH. So if the patient is started on methylprednisolone, we are just giving a NPH twice a day. And if the patient is on dexamethasone, it could be managed with a Lantus once a day. But in our hospital, like we are just following a protocol of NPH twice a day, because we could adjust the blood sugar, depending upon the blood sugar, we could adjust the NPH dose twice a day. And Lantus, as it has a long duration of action, it takes like more than 1 day to like achieve the glycemic goals. So coming to this is what we are discussing. Initial doses of insulin for steroid-induced diabetes. If the individual is not a diabetic, but even then, if started on steroids, there is a shoot up in the sugars. We are just going to start with a 0.2 unit per kg per day. That includes NPH 0.1 unit per kg in the morning and regular insulin 0.1 unit per kg before lunch. Because most of the times when we give steroid in the morning, the blood sugar before lunch will shoot up. So if the patient is already on 1 or 2 oral glucose lowering agents, we are just starting them on 0.4 unit per kg of insulin with a 0.5 unit of NPH and regular insulin 0.1 unit before breakfast, before lunch and before dinner. And if the patient is more than 2 oral hypoglycemic agents, we are just giving 0.6 unit per kg. And but it was like if the patient is already on more than 0.6, we are just increasing the insulin by 20%. But like all these are for like reading purposes. Most of the times, like never like 0.2 unit per kg is never like enough to control the steroid induced hyperglycemia. So the clinical guidance on the diabetes management in COVID-19 patients. So the patient, like he is detected to have hyperglycemia at admission on starting steroids. The blood glucose target, if it is like less than 140 pre-meal and post-meal less than 180, no further intervention is required. If it is like above the target, it could be maintained only with a diet. And if the blood sugar targets between 150 to 180 and post-meal between 200 to 250, you're just starting on a metformin with a gliptin. And if the like a pre-meal more than 180 and the post-meal more than 250, we're just starting on basal bolus regimen. And if there is a DKA or like blood sugars more than 300, we're just starting on insulin infusion. So coming to the glucose management strategies. So for type 1, we are just advising insulin pump or basal bolus regimen and monitoring blood glucose once in every 4 hours. For type 2, with low to moderate like elevated blood sugar, OHS can be used, and patients on with treated with steroids, insulin will always be the first choice, and critical illness patients, IV insulin. So for steroid-induced diabetes, definitely insulin will always be the first choice. So for like management of diabetes, for mild elevation, both OADs and insulin can be maintained, and it is not necessary to adjust the dose. In case of moderate disease, switch from OADs like oral antihypoglycemic agents to insulin for patients who are not able to eat regularly. In case of severe patients, we are starting with IV insulin as a first line of therapy. So the take-home message being, it was not like at the end of 1 month, once we recovered from the COVID, it was like there are many patients. There are many patients who develop diabetes at the end of 1 or 2 months. So we need to monitor if an individual has a like individual had COVID, they need to monitor the blood sugar initially for the initially 1 to 3 months and 3 to 6 months if there is like a risk factors like pre-diabetes and a family history of diabetes and obesity. And it was like we can soon see like the new etiology for diabetes being COVID. So it was like even if we are sure if the patient is not diabetic at the onset of COVID, there are chances of developing hyperglycemia after 3 months. Hyperglycemia after 3 months, or sometimes DKA too, as we seen a case here. So like there is definitely COVID can be a etiology for diabetes. So we need to monitor for blood sugars at 3 months and also at 6 months to monitor to make sure he doesn't develop diabetes. And there is also cases with the acute transient hyperglycemia that can become normal, and patient may become non-insulin independent diabetes too, or the blood sugars can be normal soon. Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to take the questions if any.
ఇది కపాకు ఇచ్చా
So if there are no questions, I'm just going to end this session.
స్టాండ్ చేస్తారా అది ఒకసారి
Thank you. ఎంత పడిపోయింది